Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Today we have with us Dr. Wendy Schofer, who is going to walk us through some of the things that she's doing in the world, and I will let you introduce herself. Welcome, Wendy.
Oh my goodness, I am so honored to be here. And hi, I'm Wendy Schofer. I always want to know where I'm going to start with this. I love to say that I'm a lover of black coffee, of long dog walks, and I love the sound of laughter. And I happen to be a pediatrician and a lifestyle physician. I am retired from the Navy, but still married to it for the very long haul. And I've also created my own coaching program. And so I have a bunch of different aspects to my life that just bring me joy.
Well, let's dive in and find out about the Navy. So was that before or after medicine? Like, how did that come about into your life?
Actually, that was the entry point to medicine because I had no idea how I was going to pay for medical school. I grew up with a very middle-class family. That may even be a little bit of a generous kind of description, but I took my scholarships through college. And then when I got accepted to medical school, it was kind of like, now what? And so I found out that there was a scholarship program that I could get my medical school paid for in exchange for service with the military. And so I don't know, the rest is history, but it's actually funny because I only owed 4 years of active duty time. But once I completed that, I switched over to the reserves, and then I retired from the reserves at the 20-year mark. Still blows my mind that I did that.
Yeah. So it's interesting, the navigation of the debt that you look at when you're considering medical school. You're also considering the financial burden of that training. Not necessarily for all countries, but certainly I hear this a lot, especially from the US and some of the Canadian physicians. So it's interesting that you said, I'm going to figure out how to pay for this ahead of time. Tell me that reasoning. Why was taking on debt not the option you wanted to go with?
That's a great question. And to be honest with you, I'm trying to put myself back into that place. I remember being in debt as being a big burden, that it was kind of something that in my family growing up, it's always like they were trying to get out from underneath debt. And it was something that I was really afraid of having hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like I didn't even want to consider that. As soon as I heard about the military and that I could, owe time, it's funny because I don't even remember going into any of but no, seriously, what is this loan situation?
Yeah.
I don't remember any of that. It's been a hot minute since I've had these.
Oh, 100%. I get it. It's just that understanding what might have helped guide those decisions is fascinating. It's just part of your story and the fabric that's made up who you are.
Yeah.
At that time, when you were considering going into medical school, did you have a significant other in your life? Because the commitment of time, did you know what that looked like? What was the give back service? What was it going to take to pay back this debt? Tell me more.
Oh, I'm just laughing because, of course, there's so many levels of stories in all of this. So, this was my senior year of college that, of course, I was applying to medical school, I was applying to the military. And I found out that there was one other guy who was already applying to the same scholarship program
Mhm.
and that he had already gone to have the physical. And I was so terrified about the thought of going for a military entrance physical. So I said, come on over. You got to like tell me all about these things. We started dating, right? We are now married for 25 years. So we had actually been going on our own independent paths with applying to medical school, applying to the military. It was something that was very independent. And then it just kind of lined up that we were both accepted. We chose a school that we were both accepted to. And so that part of it was kind of baked into it. Like, of course, I understand what I'm getting into as far as the relationship was involved and knowing about the military to juggle with that. But yes, there's many layers of stories here.
This is fun. This is fun. Okay, so was there any family or previous mentors who had gone through active service or military?
So both of my uncles had been like in the military, but I think they may have both been kicked out in their own in their own ways. So it wasn't like we had a military heritage that I was following in. It is funny though, to be honest with you, I remember being very interested in becoming a pilot
Hmm.
and going into the military. I thought about this early on in my high school years, and I was given some really bad information.
Hmm.
This disgruntled guy that I'd been working with told me that he had been excluded from the military because he was too tall to be a pilot and that I was too short. And that was
Hmm.
when I just said, oh, geez, that stinks. I can't be a military pilot. I guess I won't do that. I didn't
Mm.
look actually at the source of the information. But that's where, when it came up later on that I could go into the military, I was like, oh, this is another route.
Yeah.
This is another
Yeah.
route. They're not asking me how tall I am. By the
Yeah.
way, pilots are all like my size, so I
Yeah.
don't get this. But yeah, it wasn't a family heritage type of thing.
Mhm.
It was more of
Mhm.
a spark that was somewhere in the background.
Yeah. When you started in medical school, were you thinking pediatrics then?
I was open to everything. I
Okay.
was
Yeah.
totally open to everything. Um, I actually remember that there was a rotation that my husband and I were both scheduled for the same one. It was for surgery.
Hmm.
And we were getting really recruited hard because we both loved it, just the hands-on. And they both wanted us to become surgeons. And I said, great, tell us about a surgical couple that you know. And they're like, oh,
Hmm.
there's this, oh, they got hired or it got divorced
Hmm.
last year. And so it was something again where my N of one questioning did not give the best information, but it did guide us to say, you know what, we want to look at something with our careers that we also are being mindful of our marriage. This
Hmm.
is not the full information. I realize that. However, he went into emergency medicine. I went into pediatrics. And
Hmm.
I think for both of us, it's also coming to how we liked being able to do such a broad range of things in our clinical practice, as we were going through with medical rotations. It was the breadth that we really enjoyed.
Okay. Okay. So that variability, the breadth, the using multiple skills. Got it. So this is what
And
had.
relationships are really big for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that that's important because part of the decision making has now included a significant other as you're going along. Fascinating.
Yeah. Actually, I wasn't even thinking about it that way. Of course, that makes sense. I was thinking about the relationships with my patience and building relationships over
Oh, yeah,
time,
yeah. Yeah.
where surgery seemed like it was more of an episodic
Mhm.
relationship. And so I really like that opportunity because I know it came down to FP versus peds, and
Mhm. Mhm.
both of those were because of the relationship. There's
Yeah.
also a 25-year relationship with my husband now, so that's good too.
Absolutely. I think that was worth considering.
Kind of overlooked that one.
All right. Tell us how you navigated challenges within either training, early career. What did that look like for you?
Oh my God. Navigated challenges. I'm like, which ones? Because it was so hard for me. It was just, I just even right now, I just go back there. I just feel so much heaviness,
Mm.
just perpetually exhausted all the time, all the time. So, um, I was always studying. I was always working. I had, our first child was born fourth year of medical school. And so I took her to residency, and I kept on getting feedback that, when I go home, I shouldn't be going and playing with my child. I should be going and reading more. And they
Wow.
had no clue that I was just going home and passing out, and
Mm.
got pictures of child climbing all over the couch on a sleeping me. And I, later learned that I require much more sleep than what I was getting back at
Mhm.
that time, because we didn't have any of the work hour restrictions. I was a hot mess. I couldn't put
Mm.
things together. I couldn't keep things straight. And so I got to tell you how I navigated it. Um, some days I wonder. Um,
Mhm.
my husband did get deployed while I was in training, and my in-laws moved out to be with us, um,
Mhm.
and that was helpful. It was helpful from the standpoint of knowing that my child was, well cared for, and I didn't have to run in and out of the building to,
Yeah.
align with childcare. But man, I mean, I was operating on fumes back then.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. Was the feedback to go home and study more, do you think came out of that brain fog in the daytime, or a desire to help you pass things? Where did that suggestion come from, do you think, from your peers?
Um,
Pe-
so I would say, I am biased that I would say that I heard it loudest from a man who was not yet with family. And so work was everything for him. Later on, things changed in his family situation. My understanding is that things also changed in the way that he guided others.
Mhm.
Um, but his voice I heard very loudly. There were others that I also heard that were like, reminding me that my job was just to find the sick kid in the crowd. Like, that's all you got to do.
Mhm.
Just find the sick kid and take care of yourself. You're doing exactly what you need to do right now. And those are the voices that I now turn to, that I
Mhm.
have to remind myself it wasn't just the really critical ones that I took
Mhm.
with me for so very long. But I think that a lot of it is, um, I do believe that they wanted the best for me. Um, I also recognize that they were training me to be everything for everyone
Mhm.
wherever we go. With the military, you're going to be sent to austere places, and you will be the only one. Um, they wanted the best. I'm just not meant to be like a critical care doctor. It's really
Mhm.
hard to build relationships with really, really, really sick babies. And so now
Mhm.
I can justify that in my mind, like, oh, that's why I had such a hard time there. It wasn't necessarily my skills, but it wasn't where I was meant to really thrive. It
Yeah.
wasn't, really using what I now see as my strengths.
Yeah. What did active service or that payback of the scholarship look like?
So after I completed my pediatric residency, I then was an active duty pediatrician with the Navy. And
Mm-hmm.
so I practiced in military facilities. So the first 2 years, I was at the Naval Hospital in Camp Pendleton, so Southern California. Later on, we were transferred to Okinawa, Japan, and so practicing there at the Naval Hospital. I was also deployed along the way, and I served on a couple of ships. One was the hospital ship, Mercy, and excuse me, yeah. I'm trying to moment had a moment for that time frame, but yeah, it was the Mercy, and then you know it was being a pediatrician, also working with active duty and civilian adults as well, because we were the medical force wherever we went.
Got it. That transition to a different part of the country, a different country, on a ship. You've now got a family, at least one little person.
There was a second one that was born my third year of residency. So yeah, just make it the
Yeah.
package deal.
Tell me about navigating those big transitions with two physicians and two little people in tow. What does that look like to be able to create some normalcy or survival or
Yeah,
sustainability in those transitions? Because they're big moves.
they are huge moves, and I got to tell you, I question the sustainability of a lot of things that we did back then. I mean, honestly, I learned so much about what wasn't sustainable.
Mm,
Uh, my husband and I both grew up in families with a lot of parental involvement.
mhm,
And so it was very important to us to not be outsourcing childcare to all these other, different services.
mhm.
So we would kind of like do our schedules off of each other so that, someone was always around. Not recommended. We were going crazy. Okay, I was going crazy. I always felt like I was running around with my hair on fire, trying
Mm,
to juggle, where are the kids? What time do they need to be picked up? And it was unfortunate because, especially in Okinawa, they have a role called the mama-san. So it's
mhm.
it's a nanny that everybody said, go get a mama-san. That way you don't have to worry about all of this. And all I heard was, go get a surrogate mother for your child. Like
Mm,
that was what it meant to me. And unfortunately, it just piled on more and more and more, just all the time
yeah.
running around ragged. So at the end of my 4 year, commitment to the Navy, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I was like, peace out, peace
Mhm,
out. I felt, like I just was constantly exhausted and running around and not enough of the doctor that they wanted me to be, because I was supposed to take care of everything and everyone. And so, I didn't realize until later on, okay, that's called burnout. Like, fun story with that. But I didn't realize until later on that that's what it was. I just thought that I wasn't meant to be an active duty physician,
mm,
wasn't meant to work full time,
mhm,
wasn't meant to do a lot of these things. And when we moved right after that, to a civilian community for my husband to do a fellowship. And I felt like a complete fish out of water. All of a sudden, I didn't have my identity as a service member. I didn't have the identity of actually being a practicing physician because I took a sabbatical.
mhm.
Um, but, I took the time to be home with my son, who then looks at me and says, Mommy, you need to go to work. I want to go back to school. I was like, oh my God, I'm failing at this too. What is this? Love having the words of babes just telling you what you need. But yeah, but I went back into the reserves after that because I recognized that, okay, hold on a minute. Maybe I can at least do part-time
Mhm.
military. What does that look like? And so that was the entry point for me to say, all right, let me start testing this out. What works for me?
Mm.
How do I want to practice? And started taking a little bit more, I'd say a little bit more control, a little bit more decision as far as how it is that I went to practice. I was also messing around with some locums practices too, just to see,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
ones do I like, which ones do I not like. I'm like, oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
I know this is the practice I want to stay far away from. And
Yeah.
this is the one that I really love.
Yeah.
By the way, and I really appreciate that I was trained to do everything for everybody because I love, covering for solo physicians
Mhm.
out in the middle of nowhere. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, put in a needy pediatrician. I can do that. I can absolutely do that.
Fascinating. Hey, you had this um, medical school, then residency, then 4 years of active service. So it's like like 12 years of full time. Plus, we added babies in very early, and we had this commitment as a couple that we would be there for the kids too. So we've got two full-time jobs, and then a sudden stop at the end. Okay, that's enough. I'm not going to do any of that. I'll just stay home and be the mother role. And
This
that
was my
free.
one time to have a sabbatical. I'm like, this is a legit time. We're only going to be here for a year. I don't want to get knee
Yeah.
deep in a new medical practice.
Mm.
Let's try this sabbatical thing. And then my kid is the one who's like, no, we're not doing this.
There wasn't a requirement for him to be homeschooled though.
Oh
Like there
no.
wasn't a requirement. That was
No, that
is
was
that
that was
is
my
that
whole
something?
idyllic, like I'm going to be the most hands-on. I'm going to try to recapture what it looks like to be an amazing mom, the most amazing mom. And he's like, I'm not buying this.
Interesting. So your vision for you as the truly involved mother had looked like home full time, including the teaching component.
Um, I was just trying to make up, I think, for lost
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was trying to be there in all the ways that I hadn't. I had
Yeah.
been deployed, for his first
Yeah.
birthday, like all the
Yeah.
things. So I was like, oh, let me do this. Yeah, go figure that it was a little bit over the top.
Did you hear a little nugget in there from kiddos saying that to you that may have actually meant you're enough?
Mm.
Or was it a negative reflection of, no, you're failing at this too? What what else did you take away from that comment from kiddo?
Yeah. Um, I think that what I actually appreciate that he was saying I appreciate getting the insight from him as young as he was back then, because I think he was probably 4 years old. Um, but him just saying, no, we gotta like mix this up a little bit. I I appreciated the conversation that we were having, what he wanted, um, and being okay with that. So I got to tell you, well, I joke around a lot about how, well, then I was like failing at that too. Um, I think it was also just a different way to receive permission to try something else.
Mm,
And I'd love to have this beautiful gem that I took away from it. I think it's really my 4-year-old saying, no, we just need to switch this up a little bit. But I listened to him.
mm,
And as I think about that, I can see how that has really influenced how I've parented my kids
mhm,
and listening to what's working and what's not working from them as well. It's not just me telling them
mhm,
what's working. receiving that feedback and kind of, I don't know, evolving, flowing, whatever, flexing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. So tell us where you landed now. Like what is the current state of affairs? How did you end up in this place where you're coaching parents and physicians? What transpired?
Wow. Which thread do I pick up on with this one? Which
So
one do I
many.
pull? Yeah. Well, I got to tell you that, there was so many years that I just kind of felt like I was just kind of floating around, trying to
Mhm.
find what's my professional role. I started pursuing a lot of things outside of medicine. Um, just, I think it was more of me to just kind of have some stress relief, doing yoga, doing CrossFit, going out into the community, different groups, improv,
Mhm.
comedy. And I thought for the longest time that those were diversions, but I realized how I've integrated each and every one of those experiences. It was kind of like this was a different type of adult learning education journey for me because I use all of that in my medical practice as well as in what I constructed with my coaching program. And looking back at it now, because of course I thought I was just lost and wandering around, I realized that this is just what made me, who I am and what it is that I gave myself the opportunity to try different things. I always tell my kids, like, you don't know what you like or what you don't like until you actually try it. You got to
Mm.
just go out there and sample and do it. And I realized that I was going outside of the walls of the medical practice because the way that I was just being told or thinking that I had to always practice, it was exhausting for me. It
Mm.
was something that I always felt like I had to be everything for everyone. I had to know all that. I had to live up here all the time. And all the other things that I was doing were getting me out of my head and into my body, yoga and CrossFit, improv. Oh my goodness. They always joke around about how I'm the most physical in the theater because I have no problem just coming on stage as an animal and, just acting, making the motions. So getting into the body, making all the ridiculous noises, like just getting out and it's just a part of the journey. It's so
Mm.
beautiful to think about how all of this
Mm.
evolved.
When you say you were exhausted within your clinical day, you were doing everything for everyone. Tell me more about what that exhaustion and doing everything looks like. So what do you
Yeah.
mean? How does it show up? What does it cost you during your days?
Well, I'm going to acknowledge that everywhere I've ever practiced, there's always been more needs than what I could address or have the resources to be able to address. And yet always thinking, well, if it's not me, then whom? And so I took on so much. I can be I can be everything to everybody. I took my medical training and then I was like, oh, and I'm going to be the social worker for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to connect you with all these resources. I'm going to spend all this additional time. And it was the exhaustion was so much of what I was putting into it.
Mm-hmm.
And also recognizing that I recognized that the needs of patients, it's not like they were more then than they are now. But so much of the way that I practice is by actually meeting with people and hearing what they need and connecting with them. So that hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so much of it is starting to draw lines for, the boundaries of what I can do, where I can
Mm-hmm.
hand off to somebody else to
Mm-hmm.
speak up and advocate for how I need more support. Like I
Mm-hmm.
need a social worker over here.
Yeah.
Even though you
Yeah.
don't have one, like we need a social worker
Yeah.
in the clinic. Um, but being able to get really clear on that and the way that I practice the people, the need, not the people, but I love behavioral, evaluations and developmental pediatrics. I love mental health. I
Hmm.
love going through growth and nutrition. And of course, that's such a huge topic right now.
Hmm.
And I also realize it takes a lot from me. Like
Hmm.
there's a lot of energy that I'm putting into it. And
Hmm.
so recognizing doing it the way that I see that it needs to be done was something that was not compatible with the resources that were there.
Yeah.
So it makes me think of how last year I did a new locums job that was actually really close. It was primary care coverage. And I actually built a great relationship with the clinic to focus on mental health, nutrition, like all the things that I wanted to do. And I
Hmm.
said, and this is how I can work for you. They wanted me, 5 days a week. I said, I don't do full time.
Hmm.
That is not something that is going to work for anyone here. So I did overtime, either 2.5 or 3 days per week, and I spaced it out because I realized that when I came home, I didn't want to hear any more voices. I just want to sit in silence. And that wasn't a problem. Like I just gave so much and I need silence. We realize, my husband and I are like the loudest extroverted people when we're like in a space. And then we come home, we're like, don't talk to me. We're like, oh, we're actually introverts. We get fueled in silence. Oh, I wish I'd known that way back when. That would have been really cool to know that I need to build in space and silence. Amazing, amazing concept.
Yeah, definitely. I like that you recognize that what it takes to do mental health or nutritional education um, is so big compared to the limited time we're given with patients that it needs to be bigger than us doing that part. We can do that part really, really well, but not within the confines of our day. And then looking at what else is available. How else could we move this beyond me in order to preserve the resource of me within this relationship? That giving to the patients was not helping you stay sustainably around within this model. And that you couldn't do that full time or you would not be able to keep going. And that recognition of what do I need? Well, if I'm going to advocate well for my patients, while I can do the social work part, it's not in the best interest of me staying. I need someone else here to do that part. Otherwise, I'm going to not be able to keep this pace. Such important wisdom for us as we're navigating the difficulties of limited resources,
Yeah.
including ourselves as a limited resource.
Well, and what I also hear in that is kind of like finding what is the resource that I need for me.
Mm,
What is it that, the whole thing, like what fuels me?
mm,
Because there's so much that we're giving all the time. Constant, it's all outward flow. Like it's okay to receive. In fact, I want to like find what it is that I need to receive. By the way, number one answer is sleep. I need much more sleep than the average bear, at least 9 hours a night, which, blows so many minds, including the version of me from like presidency. 9 hours? Yes, it is amazing.
mm, so important, right? So important that regeneration, um, sleep is so important as part of us being at our best. Yeah, yeah, so important. Thank you. What is outside of medicine looking like for you? Who do you help? What are you noticing?
So I help my dogs go on really nice long walks. So by the way,
Beautiful.
so outside of the clinical practice, I help parents, address the stress of raising a healthy whole family. And so much of that stress now is what healthy needs to look like,
Mhm.
with all the guidance around portions and moving and keeping an eye on weight and, oh, the electronics. And by the way, parents, we still have jobs and relationships and all the other stressful things. And so that's where I really shifted over the last couple of years because I recognized that the approach that I was taking medically wasn't working,
Mhm.
with just addressing portions and movement and, see me in a couple of months because nothing changes overnight.
Mhm.
This would come back. They're like, this does not work. We're
Mhm.
just, fighting and butting heads and all these things. And so it was just adding more stress. And so I started looking at stress. How can I help with a different understanding of this? Because I was experiencing the same thing again, that stress coming up. I'm like, oh, over time, I've learned that that's emotions. Like, I got to get to the heart of what is the emotional experience that we're having. And how can we connect with our kids about that, as
Mhm.
opposed to always just trying to change what they're doing. It's,
Mm.
it's powerful work. It's funny though, because I share with other physicians. I did a presentation just this last week about the role of emotional health in pediatric weight management. And
Mhm.
a physician was like, yeah, this sounds really nice. He raises his hand. He's like, this sounds nice and all, but I don't have time for this.
Mhm.
And I was like, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were so afraid we're just going to open up Pandora's box if we start talking
Mhm.
about emotions. And yet also recognizing some physicians, it's okay. It's okay that they're not in a place in a time. I'm like, I got you. I'm
Mhm.
totally happy to be the one that does that. I'm going
Mhm.
to teach, I'm going to raise voices about, you know, just advocating how there's a different type of conversation that we can have,
Mm.
share that far and wide. And I'm also going to come up with creative ways to be able to work with patients, to be able to, or clients, families outside of the clinical office, because that's how we can continue to make it sustainable. As this is coming back to,
Mm.
like, how can we, connect with families, but also do it in a model that is sustainable for us, which is another discussion about building our own business models to be sustainable as well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So this is taking that, what you're seeing as a physician in his world with his time constraints, with his patients saying, I hear what you're saying is really valuable, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to have time to do that within the confines of the clinical day as it exists right now.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, I saw that too. And I went outside of the medical model, the medical day, and created something that works from the point of view of time to do this work. And then
And
looked creatively at how do I do it sustainably
yeah.
for both
And
the families coming to me and for myself if I'm going to take on this work.
right, because if it's not sustainable for us, it's not sustainable for anybody else. Like, we got to figure out how we can do it. Um, for those, of us that it's the giving, like, how can we
Mm.
continue to give?
Yeah.
And this is actually what has drawn me back to, medical practice more than anything, because I went really, really low with my clinical practice for a long time. And now I'm building it back up because I'm creating my own, specialty clinic that is all about, hey, I want to have these conversations,
Mm-hmm.
want to welcome families in and be able to do this because I have the tools, I have, the interest, I have zero fear talking about emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognize that there is such a role for this. We
Mm.
build this out. So I'm like, I specialize in this, and I'm going to let everybody else take care of all the other things.
Mm. Yeah,
So,
that's right. And so then the physician in their world is saying, okay, I know that the emotional conversation is important. I know we're going to get a lot further for this family and this child with this conversation, but it can't be me. Just like you were saying at the beginning, I can't be the social worker too, right? So that recognition of what else do you need? What resource do you need to find that you can outsource to who can do it better than you? You can do it, but not within the confines of the day. Where do you go looking for the things that can help you, help your patients? And then you became the expert for them to be able to refer to, which is super lovely to see that transition. As you
Yeah.
build a skill set, you've decided, how can this fit? It can't fit within regular medicine the way it existed before. I will go outside of that and do it in a different way.
It's really empowering to know, like, I have something that's like really amazing, like a tool, a skill, a passion that others are like, "Mm, I just don't see that in myself. Like, this isn't something that
Mm-hmm.
I do." And I'm like, got you. I got
Mm-hmm.
this. And so walking in now, I know that I can also totally, whether I do this on my own with my private practice, whether I do this embedding within another clinic, I'm like, I totally got this. It's whatever I want to create. It's what
Mm.
I want to create. And that just feels so amazing right now because that's all the control that I felt like I never had. Like the ability to
Mm.
say, you know what, this is what works for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is how I can continue to do this in a way that, benefits me and the clinic, the patients, the system, whatever the system is of whatever sort. Oh,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. And of course, it took all of that other stuff, to get through all of that, to get here, to be like, oh, this is what I really want. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing, the fabric that get the weaving of the career, the different experiences that you have, the different things that you notice, and then that ability to step in and say, here's a need I'm not seeing an answer for. I'm really passionate about it. I want to go learn more. Putting that skill set together and redefining who you are within medicine now. It's such an amazing journey to have watched that just in this brief conversation. Thanks, Wendy. How do people reach out to you now that they're so curious about what you do with families? How do they find you?
Well, I'm going to trust that you'll put the spelling in the show notes. So my website is wendyschofermd.com. And my podcast is Family in Focus with Wendy Schofer MD because I'm not particularly creative about that. So, but if you go to my website, you can find out all about the Family in Focus program, the private practice, like all the things that are coming up. It's such a joy, and that's the landing spot. So come on over,
Mhm.
check it out.
Perfect. And tell us about, if there is a physician or clinician listening and they're in that craziness of giving it all to patients, and they're looking at that from a point of view of I can't keep this pace, I can't keep doing it this way. What would you recommend? What did you find was helpful initially as you were in that space of busyness?
Yeah. I gotta tell you, I think I did it wrong more than I did it right. Because I thought for the longest time it was working harder and pushing harder. But I had to go through kind of the getting to the bottom and really feeling like this, that I did not do it the right way, that I failed on so many levels. I realize now that that's completely a lie, but that was kind of like my inflection point to
Mm-hmm.
start looking at, or to start exposing myself to all these different things, that I now have the language of, this is something that works for me. This is
Mm-hmm.
something that I want more of in my life. There's a whole lot of things that I want less of. And I was always fighting it, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
there's too much of this, too much of that to do. The to-do list is always so long. But when I would find that gem of what it is that I wanted in my life, I'm like, oh, I want to hold on to this. Just whatever sip, whatever little tidbit, I'm going to put that in my back pocket for now. I want to have this in my life. And I started collecting that. And I
Mm.
think part of the wording that I love to share with other parents now is to just ask, what is it that you need?
Mm.
And not need to, there's no need
Mhm.
to do, but just slowing down and just asking, what do I need right now? I didn't have that language back then.
Mm.
I've realized that I've answered the question over time. I need sleep. Okay. I need space in my schedule. I
Mhm.
need movement. Oh, I need to be able to move my body. Like there's a lot of things that as I look at now, that has all come together into what I've created for myself. And now I have the language to continually ask myself, okay, just pause right now. Just what do you need? What do you need?
Mm.
Because that continues to evolve. I would love to say that I had this great story and this was the aha. And, I started doing this all. No, I didn't. It was dirty. It was really dirty and ugly. And I was like, oh, I suck at all of this. Thankfully, I realized later on that was not the case. I started
Mm.
finding what was really magical.
Mm.
Oh, just took a little while to get there.
Yeah. And tell me, how did improv come about?
So one more episode of burnout. So by the way, I have been through so many different times of burnout. I was uh my gosh, my kids were early teens. My husband was deployed. I was strung out and I was like, I just need to get out of the house. You need to not kill each other tonight because mommy needs some adult time. And I just wandered into the improv studio. I had heard that they were having some classes.
Mhm.
And I just went over there and started taking classes. And I got to tell you, in honesty, it was the hardest thing because, I showed up as a pediatrician, as a military officer. I was still in the reserves then. As a mom, as a professional, I brought all this in with me and I was like, I don't know what to do here. Like, how am I supposed to do that on stage as a pediatrician? How am I supposed to like cuss? Like I cuss, but no, like I shouldn't be doing. Oh, I am now the pediatrician with the sailor's mouth. I totally embrace that. I didn't back then.
Mhm.
And so it was something where I just kept on playing the same role of I'm a pediatrician all the time.
Mm.
Pediatricians don't say that, do that. It was actually something that I returned later on and repeated the class when my son was 18 years old. He went through it with me.
Mm.
And that was another level of fun. But anyway, I had changed so much because we also had the benefit of COVID in between the first time and
Yeah.
the second time. And I was like, none of this stuff is important. I'm checking this at the door. I just want to be
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And improv has helped me really find what it is that is uniquely me and
Mm.
just play with it. If I can play all these characters on stage, it's really easy to play this character in real life. Kind of like her. She's kind of neat. I really,
Fascinating. The whole ability to learn how to leave all your roles at the door and how it was impossibly hard. The first time you went through it, you didn't do it at all. The second time you came in, you're like, no, I want to take off pediatrician and I want to take off mother and I want to take off and just come in as Wendy.
well, so I was on a house team. So, you get a team together that's going to perform in shows together. We were practicing one night, and I was with my partner, and we were nuns in New York. Go. And so automatically, I just put my hands together. I looked up to the sky, and I was Sister Jill, and he was Sister Josephine, and we were in New York City at the top of the Empire State Building because we wanted to be closer to God. And our mentor was like, stop, He's like, this is the worst scene I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, oh, what is it? He's like, what are you doing? I said, we're nuns in New York. He's like, duh. Like, of course you're nuns in New York. It's all you're talking about. He's like, who walks into a room and announces their job? Who does that? He's like, I'm a shipbuilder. You don't know that. He's like, we know they're nuns. You don't announce that. I'm like, oh my God, hold my beer. Physicians do that all the time. I introduce myself as being a physician. Moms most definitely do that all the time. We lead with, I'm a mom. I'm like, I got a double dosing of all of this. He's like, I don't care what you do. I care about what you care about, what you're feeling, what your passions are. That's what makes a good character. That's what makes an interesting person that you want to hang out with. Nobody wants to be around the best nun. Go. Show us what they really have. And then we totally took it sideways. We were like, we were looking for people with big hair because we actually loved hard rock music. And we thought that, we would be able to find our idols in New York City. It was more like bringing all the different, characters. We were still nuns in New York, but what was it that we were, feeling, and what was leading it? And so I was like, oh, yeah, I still have a lot more work to do with this.
I love that. I love that. So helpful. What makes this interesting? That's so fun. Thank you so much for this conversation, Wendy. Hopefully we've all taken that little nugget of inspiration about other possibilities and other things we could bring in here to our wonderful life. So thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone. Bye. Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.